Hey everybody, it's Comic Crack, and I'm back with another video. Today, it's a video focusing on some of my other interests and hobbies, like film and music specifically. I recently discovered that a soundtrack to one of my favorite films has been released for, I believe it's the first time. I believe it's never been released before. So when I was looking into that music, there was a fantastic record release, an LP release of it, that if you follow me on Twitter you probably saw some photos of. But when I started looking into it, I didn't realize how much of a resurgence this film had in recent years. With a screening at the Toronto International Film Festival a few years ago. Did it say 2014? I can't remember the exact year, but not too long ago. And then a resurgence on DVD and Blu-ray, which I also was unaware of. So before we get to all that, I just kind of wanted to do a tiny bit of history about my history, I guess, with this movie. A lifetime ago, as you've heard me talk about before, our local bookstore, McNally Robinson, had a small shop in Osborne Village. The storefront that exists there now is it's a coffee shop. I think it's still a coffee shop now, but back then it was just a tiny bookshop, and it made an impression on me, like most things did when I started kind of exploring more of downtown Winnipeg especially, and then also just broadening my horizons as far as like watching movies and music went, once I discovered all these other outlets. Because obviously, I guess suffice it to say that there was no internet back then. It seems so strange to be having to say that statement, but there was no internet, so there wasn't a lot of ways to discover a lot of new things unless you went out and found these places that somehow were tapped into these different resources. So for example, when we discovered Movie Village, we discovered an entire world of just crazy films that we had zero reference for whatsoever. There was nothing there was nothing about any of it that we recognized. We've seen this, so therefore that led to that. This was just its own entity. And it was the same with music. Once I discovered a lot of the great record stores we had downtown back then, and starting to discover that kind of music, and then some of these things obviously had magazines dedicated to them, so then you could find out a little more information that way. So it's the same with the bookstore. I mean, walking into McNally back then, and especially within that context of wanting to know more about these type of films that I was discovering, wanting to know more about, wow, if all this is out there, I wonder what else is out there. And finding this bookstore that had these amazing books. They had a lot of kind of big store type of, big chain store type of books as well too. But they also had a few really niche sections that were film related, art related, and culture, I guess. And in that, I discovered the research series of books. And the only one I've ever picked up, I've seen many of the other ones, they had all of them there at the time. The one that jumped out at me was the Research Guide to Incredibly Strange Films, and right on the cover was my first introduction to The Mask. That image there is taken from The Mask. And then inside the back cover is another image taken from some of the surreal kind of dreamscapes from The Mask. I thought there was one more image in here too. No, unless there's I think there's one more scattered throughout the book. Anyway, so this book is something that kind of grew up with me. At the time, I knew nothing about any of these movies in here, and throughout my life, I've come back to it multiple times in my life, because I've since discovered a lot more of the movies in here. Just flipping through, I see they have Frank Henlotter, which would have been the person that I would have been most familiar with because of his movie Basket Case, which you can see a photo of there. So that would have been something that I would have latched onto because I was a big horror film buff back then, renting VHS tape after VHS tape of any horror movie I could get my hands on. But it lost me slowly after that, or quickly after that rather, because they started talking to you about guys like Herschel Gordon Lewis, and let me just read off the names: Ray Dennis Steckler, Ted V. Mickles, Russ Meyer, Joe Sarno, who's an incredible director as well, David Friedman, Doris Wishman, one of my all-time favorites, and Larry Cohen, who's also just an incredible favorite of mine. Then they had some articles, genre articles on biker films and LSD films, women in prison films, etc. So it was great to flip through it in that regard, to kind of read some of these bits and pieces and oddities about this whole world that I knew nothing about. So anyway, to The Mask. That was my first introduction to what the hell is it. There was nothing about the movie written in this book, so it just remained for me for many, many, many years, this image on the cover of this book that I knew nothing about, but based solely on that image, it's like, I have got to find this movie. I've got to see what the hell this giant skull and this mysterious woman have to do with one another. Cut to many years later, living in Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario, and getting involved in kind of, well, always been involved in music, but getting more involved into music, and more specifically making music myself and making some more experimental noise type music with myself and just with a few friends. Starting of the internet, and even just a little bit pre-internet as well. Getting involved in like tape trading, but once the internet was kind of in full swing, I guess, especially for me in my life, when I was using it more for research and selling on eBay once I discovered that, and buying on eBay, and then discovering a lot of these noise musicians having their own websites. The whole San Francisco scene, again, was something that I've talked about many times, and it was a huge influence in my life. That noise scene was a huge, and still is to this day. I find all that stuff amazingly fascinating. I love the aesthetics of it. I love the sounds themselves. Associated with that were a couple of labels, and one was Brutal Sound Effects, and then their kind of subsidiary label, Stomachache Records, I think is what it was originally called, and then Dolor del Estómago, I think was what it turned into afterwards. And he or they had a lot of things up for sale and for trade on their sites, including DVDs, including CDRs with some handmade covers and everything, just pieces of paper with some art on it, of various records dug up from thrift shops, of sound effects from the Toy Story movies and the Monsters Inc. movie, to local performances of artists and musicians that were in their kind of circle. That entire world was such a great resource for me, and got me involved into that whole scene in a little bit different ways, but also still fed that curiosity in me, which I guess I've always had. I've always had a curiosity for these strange and unusual things, and especially really digging off the beaten path and to find something that's a little more obscure, just because I still like that sense of like, holy shit, can you believe that this exists? Or holy shit, look what I found. This one person and his 5 friends made this incredible album or shot this incredible movie. So through that, I finally got my hands on a DVD copy of The Mask, like a DVD-R copy basically. I don't think this was taken from like an original release, although it does have all the labeling at the bottom. I don't really know the backstory to this specific release. Not only that, inside are a couple pairs of 3D glasses. The label on the DVD is 3D, the back page is 3D. So I finally had a chance to watch the movie after all these years, and it was incredible. A really, just as good as I imagined all those years when I revisited the book and was confronted with these images again. And it quickly turned out to be one of my favorites, and the more I dug into it, the more I found out about it. Not only was it a Canadian movie, it was the first 3D Canadian movie. It was early on in kind of Canada producing more films outside of just documentaries. It was, you know, early horror movie, early Canadian horror movie, and it just has a really amazing lineage attached to it. I think it was 1961 was the year that it was put out. So it just appeals to me on so many levels, especially when I found out it was Canadian. That automatically made it all the more amazing to me. Now, jumping ahead a few more years after that, I'm in film, working in film in Winnipeg and meeting some people in town, and a local kind of documentary filmmaker. He kind of did documentaries of Guy Madden movies, like the making of some Guy Madden movies and things like that. Is a writer himself and did a little bit of directing himself. I actually got to work with him on some reshoots for a horror movie that was here and abandoned at one point, that he kind of got a chance to pick up and finish it off. Caleb Battensnell is his name, and he wrote a book, The History of Canadian Horror Cinema. They Came From Within, which, again, if you're into horror movies, but specifically the history of Canadian cult horror movies, this is the book for you. It's a really, really fantastic read. And just even through this book, watching some of the movies that he's talked about when I first picked up the book was a great experience, and to read along with it. In the book, there's about a 5 or 6 page section specifically on The Mask and its history, and the history of the creators and the writers and the people who filmed it, and talking about how they got the money, and talking about the world that they came from before they did this movie, and why they did the movie, etc., etc. So a really, really great read if you ever want to check it out. It is Arbiter Ring Publishing, which I'll make sure that I put links in the bottom to things that I can. Highly recommended though. Very, very cool book. So through the years, I've watched the movie a few times. The 3D is always incredible to me. The basic premise in the movie is that it's this mask that you put it on, and it kind of gives you these visions, and the wearer eventually goes insane. So for the most part, it's a two-dimensional movie. When the mask gets put on, apparently when it was first released in the theater, you walked in the door and you got this little 3D mask, and the narrator or a voice from the screen would just keep repeating, "Put the mask on now, put the mask on now." And that's when you're supposed to put the mask on, and you'd get bombarded with these just crazy, this crazy imagery of this other world, and this insane 3D that even today looks just as spectacular as I think it does anyway, especially if you like that kind of red and cyan 3D that we've talked about before on this channel. So I guess it had a resurgence. Kino Classics put out a DVD Blu-ray of The Mask again after its theatrical run. There's a great documentary on here as well. It's specifically for a 3D player and a 3D TV, but with this Blu-ray, they do have the 3D sequences for the red and blue glasses that you can watch. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with glasses, but I have many pairs, so it was never a concern really. So you can see it in the original kind of 3D. I don't know if a 3D TV is something I'd ever consider investing in, but if I ever did, it would be specifically because of this one movie. So it's a newly restored from original 35mm prints. There's audio commentary. There's a 20-minute documentary about Julian Rothman, the man behind the mask. There's trailers and TV spots, and then there's 3D sequences in anaglyph red cyan format, 3D calibration guide, and then some short films. The films of Slavko Vorkabich, The Life and Death of a Hollywood Extra, montage sequences, etc., etc., etc. One Night in Hell, a little 7-minute short that's also in 3D, I believe, too. So yeah, that's the history with that. So I got this recently. Once I discovered the record and once I discovered that this existed, I hopped onto Amazon and it was there in abundance, or maybe not abundance, but there was a few copies anyway, free shipping, and it showed up a few days later and I started digging into it right away. So that's great. These will forever kind of live on my shelves as some classics of just my life watching movies. And now to the the most amazing part. I will crack this open and we'll have a look, because the photos that I saw online of this release really were absolutely fucking incredible. So I'm gonna pause here, crack it open, turn you around so we can see it all together a little better. Okay, I'm back. It's opened up. I realized a couple things. I tried to film looking at it with one hand as I was kind of manipulating it on the table. It was a pain in the ass. So I'm just going to redo this and we'll look at it this way. Maybe it'll be a little easier. I also noticed that my white balance wasn't correct, so I looked too yellow in the first half. I realized that. I'm not changing it and talking all over again. It's a one-take wonder over here at the Comic Crack household. Okay, so it's even cooler than I thought. And I knew it would sound pretty great. I'll get into my one or two concerns when we get to it, but overall it's really a really incredible job. So here's a look at the record in its kind of vinyl sleeve. The vinyl sleeve itself is screen printed with images over top of it to, I don't know, just make it even fucking cooler than what it already was. So there's the front cover, and here's the back cover with all the information. Try not to get too much of a glare in there. There you go. But again, all of this crazy stuff you're seeing is actually printed on the vinyl protective record jacket. So there we go. So what do you get with this? You get two records. The first record is the original soundtrack from 1961, broken up into 3 sequences, and I believe I don't know actually. I think the 6, 12, 18 minutes. Yeah, I don't know if it's in at 45 RPM, so it takes up both sides, or if it's just a one-sided vinyl. And then the other record has a live re-scoring of the movie from 2013 by a band that I was unfamiliar with called Larva. I don't know if they also played along with screenings of the movie, if they did like a tour with it or anything. What I do know when I was reading the information is that they wanted to keep the kind of recording style true to what he did in the 60s, using reel tapes, using some older effects pedals and things like that, and I think some like rack synthesizers possibly. I don't know exactly. I'm sure they have a breakdown of all the gear that they used, but instead of going a kind of purely digital route, they skipped that whole thing to give it more of that character of the sound, right? So when we take it out of its sleeve, you can get a better look at the craziness that's going on there. That's pretty great in itself, having a protective slipcase specifically for it. And then we get a look at some of the artwork on the front, and then the nice clean look of the back, just printed on white. Really great. Nice thick heavy spine. Like the whole package is pretty thick. The one thing I'm worried about is the cardboard that's used for it. It's sturdy enough, but there's something about it that feels like it's not going to last forever, which I guess nothing lasts forever. But yeah, I hope, I think this is just going to take some extra care as far as making sure that it doesn't split and open up. Sometimes what happens with the old record sleeves is, or record jackets, is they split right on the edges where it kind of holds onto the record. So I'll just have to be extra delicate with this puppy. So the one thing that kind of sold me on it as soon as I saw the images was this. Let me see if you can see that. Yeah, there you go. So there's the look at the beauty of the gatefold and how to use a fucking gatefold jacket. That's really taking full advantage of it, with some cutouts for the eyes, and then the red and the blue record mimicking the actual glasses, which I think is just a spectacular thing. Let's start with the Larvacide here. We'll just pull this out. I'll pull both of these records out just to show you this as well. On the information sheet for each side of the record is the same image printed, so you get a little taste of wearing a mask and what you're going to see when you put on the mask. Really well done. I think it's just super clever. Very great way to present. Let's have a look at this to see if it was indeed a one side. Yeah, that's a one-sided vinyl on this one. So this is the original score on beautiful red, and it is, you won't be able to tell on here, but this is just a blank side. I've had some records in the past that when they've just been one-sided, they've done like an engraving or an etching on the other side. That would have been kind of nice to have seen on this. But hey, it's still a beautiful thing. Let's have a look at the rescoring side, because I noticed that there's a little more material, but again, it looks like it's only one-sided as well too. Yeah, only one-sided as well. So yeah, I mean, same deal. It would have been great to have seen something on it, but still, it's a beautiful looking record. Really nice. Not the heaviest duty vinyl, but still pretty heavy. Slip that back in there. So the Larvacide, the insert sheet, again with the image on the front there, and then a really great layout and design on the back with just some photos and talking about the recording process itself. Inspired by the primal screech and skronk of Myron Schaefer's pioneering electroacoustic soundtrack. Larva set out to score the film's bizarre 3D nightmares using only basic sound sources and effects. Oscillators, treated guitar, creaky analog synths, theremin, lots of old school tape, echo, spring reverb, and live Foley sound effects. Incredible. So that answers my question there. They only scored the 3D sections. Oh, here we go. So the rescore was first performed at Flatpack Festival in Birmingham in 2013. In this recording, we've tried to recreate as faithfully as possible the original performance. Everything you hear was recorded live to quarter-inch tape in a single take, with the performers playing in sync to a projection of the film. Very cool. A note on the track listing: track 1 was played over the film's opening credits, etc., etc. That's nothing really that you need to hear. So there you go. The basic information of the recording session. Really great. It would have been nice to see a little booklet with a little more information, but still, I think I'm nitpicking at this point because it's a beautiful fucking presentation. And then here's the insert for the original score side, and again, same kind of thing. You can see the pictures of what the original 3D mask looked like when you went to see the movie. I'm not sure if for the new screenings they made some more. I'm sure it says somewhere, but so yeah, that just gives a background on the original score itself and how, and how it was recorded. Also inside are a bunch of other bonus pieces. Let's make sure I got everything out of there. Yeah. Sorry, bumped you there. First things first, what I wasn't quite aware of, a little kind of bookmark telling me that I have copy number 282 out of 300, so it looks like it's at the point of being sold out. I think I mentioned it in the first half. I bought this from the UK, so I probably ordered it now quite a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago probably. I'll make sure again that I put links down below to the website, the record label, and if you're lucky, maybe there's a copy left or something for anybody who may be interested. A little one-sheet advertisement for the Blu-ray and for Kino archives. A small reproduction of like a handbill that looks like oh, check that out, that's pretty great. I never actually saw that on the back. Kind of like a postcard with a Canadian stamp on it there. Really great. And some of the original artwork for when it first came out. And then you get what I love, lobby cards. You get a nice lobby card of, again, some of the original artwork for the movie when it first came out in 1961. Beautiful. I think there was the first handful of people who bought the record had some more extras in it. Obviously, at this point, with number 282, you're not getting those extras. I can't remember off the top of my head what those extras were, but if you're interested, check out the website and it'll give you all the details. So there we go. That's it. I'm going upstairs right now to listen to this sucker. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you found that somewhat entertaining and interesting. And again, if any of this stuff does interest you, follow the links. I'm sure you can see, if not the trailer, I'm sure you can probably find the whole movie here on YouTube. But I'd really recommend the Blu-ray or the DVD. Like I said, if you have some of the 3D glasses yourself, you can watch those sections on TV, on your TV at home. Just a regular TV, you don't need anything special, just the glasses. Highly, highly recommended movie. Really fantastic stuff. Especially for the Canadians out there who might be into horror movies and just kind of the history of our industry here in Canada. This is a really important piece of it, I think. So I'm really glad that the Europeans have decided to take hold of this and give it such a fantastic presentation. Yeah, it would have been nice to have seen something like this come out from a company here in Canada, but there you go. So that's it, The Mask. Thank you very much for watching. We'll talk to you.